Thank you. Okay, so welcome to the Sheffield Sunday as Bill sees it's meeting. This is a main share meeting, and it is with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Sherri from Tennessee, who's come to share with us for about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for general sharing, or if you'd like to ask a question. So thank you so much, Sherri. It's wonderful to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sammy. Thank you, Young, for the invitation. I like to say when I get invited to speak at a meeting, I like to return the text or phone call or email or whatever it is and say, thank you for giving God this opportunity to speak through me. Because that's what I really believe this is about. I don't believe that I'm a good storyteller or articulate in any way, but I do believe that God has powers beyond myself and my ego. And I don't get nervous because I've learned along the way that you're just people and I don't have to impress you. And you're just like me. And so one of my prayers is, God, empty me of me and fill me with thee. I say that each time I come to share at a meeting, and that's very true today. And you guys were only reading some readings, and I got weepy. I get weepy almost every time because this is such a beautiful, beautiful program. So good morning, good day, good glorious, wherever you are, good glorious day. My name is Sherri, and I am an alcoholic. I chose this reading because I love the sunlight. There's a thing in the book we call the sunlight of the spirit. And for me, that's what this deal is really about. It's about the sunlight of the spirit. And in terms for all of us to share, it's called the fellowship of the spirit. And there are so many people on this meeting that I know and love with all my heart that I've never met in person. And that's just beautiful to me. That's standing in the sunlight. One of the things that I wanted to talk about in this reading, it says, when the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me. See, I believed when I got here, I came with a very shaming, condemning, punishing God of my parents' and grandparents' understanding. One of the things for me that standing in the sunlight means is letting go of my old ideas and being open to new ideas. And my conception of God was that God was big and unfathomable and omnipotent and almighty and all powerful. But he wasn't any of that for me. Because I had done so many things wrong that I didn't think that God would care about me. And so there was this question in the book, which I just kind of bypassed, because what I said is, I believe in God. I don't need the first 3 steps. Oh, and I said that for so many years. And if by chance there's anyone on here that's new, please take those first 3 steps, because I'll tell you what, they bring freedom. They bring you into the sunlight. I've had many people, Liv, I love you so much. We giggle about this. And, I've had people come to me and say, I'm living in 10, 11, and 12. And they're absolutely in emotional relapse. I need to live in 1, 2, 3 as well. Because if my life is unmanageable, it's because I'm trying to manage it. And if I'm trying to inject power into the lives of others, I don't have any power. And what I've learned along the way is that self wears me out. I am completely exhausted by self when I get into all of that, when I try to think that I have power. And so what happened for me is someone came to me and said, your God is too small. What? I believe in an almighty, all-knowing, omnipotent, all-powerful, all-inclusive God. How could that God be too small? The God was so small, it wasn't big enough for me. It wasn't personal because I was going to hell. See, that's what I was taught. So one night I got on my knees and I fired the God that I came here with. And I said, I'm sorry, man. You're just too small for me and you're not working. And I opened my arms wide and I asked for a bigger, universal, all-inclusive, me included, God to come into my life. And since that day, I've had an ever-evolving relationship with a never-changing God. Because the more that I stand in the sunlight, the closer I become to God. So I didn't choose a conception of God. I chose to let go of my old conception of God because it was a very old idea. The idea was so old it wasn't even mine. I've learned that along the way here, that a lot of my old ideas aren't even mine. Old ideas that I had about people and relationships and money, God, they're not even my ideas. They were the ideas of my parents, my grandparents. And you guys said new ideas, a new relationship with your creator, a new freedom and a new happiness. I said those things because it says a new freedom and a new happiness. It says a new relationship with my creator. We talk about having new ideas, or at least being open to new ideas. And the reason I say that is because note that it doesn't say a better version of the old. It says a new relationship with my creator, a new freedom and a new happiness, new ideas, not a better version of the old. I really like when he talks about it melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. Man, it was so dark when I got here. I was so dark when I got here. I was so heavy. Self wore me out. I was out there drinking and doing things that I wasn't proud of. And I, spent a lot of time looking for love in all the wrong places, which brought shame and guilt and fear, restlessness, irritable discontent. I knew something was wrong with me, but I didn't know what. I remember going to every church that I possibly could ever since I was a kid. I remember when I was 10-ish years old, I only wore dresses, and I announced and promised and claimed that I wasn't going to be like all the boys, like my brother and the boys in the neighborhood. I wasn't going to cuss, and I wasn't going to drink, and I wasn't going to smoke. And I don't even know where I got any of that from. But by the time I was 15, I was stealing cars and going to all-night keg parties where they were freebasing outside issues in the kitchen. And this was my life since I was 15 years old. And so I continued to do that, and I continued to stand in the darkness. I had many suicide attempts, was locked in a psych ward. Went to every possible spiritual retreat that I could, every church that I could, every workshop that I could, every treatment that I could. That was for mental health, because I didn't know I had a problem with drinking. And then when I came here, I learned that my problem wasn't drinking. Notice that the only step that talks about alcohol is the very first step. The rest talks about spiritual actions, the spiritual ways to live, a guide to the sunlight at last. And so where he says it may be possible to find explanations of spiritual experience such as ours, but I have often tried to explain my own and have succeeded only in giving the story of it. So what I'm going to do is just give some stories of standing in the sunlight at last, some experiences of my life. The one thing I want to go back to, because I was talking about steps 1, 2, and 3. This has been so important for me because I didn't know there was a difference. Belief is not reliance. Just because I believe in God doesn't mean I rely on God. Relying on God has been incredibly different in my life. What I say today is peace is still. I saw the bomber with a big, maybe they're standing in the sunlight too. um, or maybe they soon will be. We'll save a seat, right? um, yeah, belief is not reliance. And I can believe in God all day long, but it doesn't mean I rely on God. And so when I realize that I'm trying to control and manage and have power where I don't have power, I quickly come to believe that it's because I'm relying on myself. Or when I think that I know how to run your life, it's because I'm relying on myself. And the only thing that relying on myself does is make me exhausted, very tired, very, very tired. And I don't want to be tired anymore. I want to be in the sunlight of the Spirit. I want to be happy, joyous, and free. I'm going to tell this really quick story that wasn't in the plan, but see, that's why God leads these meetings. So there's a prestigious university here, and I was offered a job, a medical assistant and phlebotomist. And I was offered a job there, and the money is way more than I was making. And it's a very prestigious university, and it's a medical university. And I went and met the team. They interviewed me one day. They offered me the position the next. And I took a couple days to think about it because they have you pay for parking. I'm sorry, I've never paid to go to work before. And where you have to park is 15 minutes from the building, 15 minutes away, one way, whether it's raining, snowing, sleeting, sunshine, whatever. So that's an extra half an hour of my day. Then it's 2.5 hours a week. And then it's like 1,000 something hours a year. And they also had, I know our healthcare is different, but we pay for our healthcare here. And I was going to be on a tier where I was paying the same as someone who makes $100,000 a year, except I wasn't making $100,000 a year. Yet, God, universe. And so what I did was I was unsure because in me, I wanted the job. And then the other part of me was it felt like chaos. Plus, I work from home now doing billing. And I don't have to drive anywhere. And the traffic here in Nashville is really like extreme. So I factored all these things in and I was confused and I wasn't really sure. And I was kind of putting them off. They really wanted an answer. And what I like to do in the step 3 portion of things is I like to say, God, decide for me. And then it came to me very, very clearly. There's a line in the book that says, we are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. It doesn't say we think so. It doesn't say maybe. It says we are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. And what came to me is this happy, joyous freedom? It was not. I declined the job. That's such a big deal. That's standing in the sunlight because my ego really wanted to announce the prestige of working at that university. I even went so far because because I don't have alcohol. I don't have a problem with drinking today. I have a problem with thinking today. And this is what happened. If I get pulled over by the police and they see my Vanderbilt name tag, they're going to let me go. I mean, I haven't been pulled over by the police in a very long time, knock on wood. But this is my thinking, right? This is where my alcoholism takes me into crazy thoughts, right? But I was able to do that because today I stand in the sunlight at last. And what I like to call that is ease and freedom. Ease and freedom. The book calls it ease and comfort. I like to call it ease and freedom, and that's what I want in every area of my life. Ease and freedom in my relationships, in my job, in my money. That's what I want, ease and freedom. That's what standing in the sunlight means to me, because there is a darkness that I could easily go to, and I just don't allow myself to do it. When I lived in New York, I lived in an apartment complex. It was a very large apartment complex, several buildings. And then next door, there was another building that was a different name. Did not own by the same company. It was a different apartment built complex, another large one. But they had to drive through. There was a split in the fence where they had to drive through our complex to get to the main road. And so one day I was walking my dogs, and there was a field across the way, and I was walking my dogs before work. And there was a man in the other complex across the way who was obviously deaf and mute, because he was holding a phone toward me and making a sound. And I turned my head and I said, God, I don't have time today. I have to get the dogs inside. I have to finish getting ready. I can't be late. What if all the lights are red? I just can't do it today. So I continued to keep my head turned, and I walked into my apartment, and I heard my own voice. That's funny when you hear your own voice, right? You say it enough, you start to believe it. A belief is just a thought you keep thinking, right? So what I said was to myself, well, Sherri, did you turn your will and your life over to the care of God today or not? And I was like, dang it. So I put the dogs in, and I went back outside, and I went over to the guy. And what had happened was I took the telephone, and it was a call from, he was expecting a medical ride to pick him up to take him to a doctor's appointment. And the lady on the phone told me that he was so anxious and so overwhelmed with nervousness and fear. And she said, oh, he thinks it's tomorrow. Or she said, he thinks it's today, but it's tomorrow. The appointment is tomorrow, so he hasn't missed the ride. Oh, wonderful news. So I communicated that to him. You know how I communicated that to him? Because I know sign language. So of all the people in my large apartment complex, and of all the people in his large apartment complex, God put us in direct line. We were the only people around at that time of day, so that I could communicate him. And when the book talks about ease and comfort, and I talk about ease and freedom, do you have any idea the shift in the countenance of that man from anxiety to freedom and ease and relief? Because here's where I stand in the sunlight. I argue with self and say, well, Sherri, did I turn my will and my life over to the care of God or not? So standing in the sunlight for me is not only turning my life and my will over to the care of God, it's taking the action when God arranges the appointments. I just go along and see what happens, and then I try to live my life, because there's a line in the big book in the chapter Working with Others, and it says, that very first page there, one sentence, it says, to be helpful is our only aim. To be helpful is our only aim. It doesn't just say to be helpful to other alcoholics. And so for me, the fact that I was able to swallow self and swallow pride and swallow ego and worry about myself, I was able to go and offer ease and comfort to that man, ease and freedom. That's standing in the sunlight for me. I think this was a couple years ago. I was meeting my sponsor at conference, and the cost of something, it was either the cost of that or the cost of something I needed for something else, I don't know, was $192. And I received a check in the mail from something that was so long ago that I had forgotten about it. And the check was for $162. So now I only needed $30. That's standing in the sunlight. I was walking my dog one day and she squatted to potty, and we turned around to walk back home, and the neighbor down the street yelled, "Aren't you gonna pick it up?" And so I put my dukes up, my internal dukes, and I whipped around, and I'm Italian and I'm from New York and I'm ready to retaliate. But I stood in the sunlight. And what I said was, "She just tinkled." And he was profusely apologetic. "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And then I stood in the sunlight beaming and I said, "It's okay, I understand. People do that all the time." Right? Because it's profound to be understood and it's profound to be forgiven. And he was ashamed and embarrassed and humiliated, and I could tell. Probably because he was thinking he should have minded his own business. That's where I live. That's the most often phrase my sponsor says to me. "Well, Sherri, that's none of your business. Minding my own business is a spiritual principle." So I was able to offer that man relief and freedom too from the shame of opening his mouth, because man, oh man, how many times have I opened my mouth and felt ashamed? That's the sunlight. And when I turned around to go back home, what I said is, "Wow, God, you are so impressive." Because I would not have been able to do that on my own strength. The character defects are not behavior management. It says I have moral and philosophical convictions galore, but I could not live up to them. It says I could not. It doesn't say I would not, because I wanted to be good, do good, have better, be better, live better, do better. I wanted to all my life. I knew that was a problem because I kept feeling ashamed of everything I'd done. I had a sponsee that I talked to yesterday, and we've only been working together a couple months, few months maybe. I'm going through the steps. And when we first were appointed together, he was very resentful about his son. He was resentful to his wife because he felt like she betrayed him, and that he didn't really want to get pregnant when they were getting pregnant or whatever. And he was resentful about his son, and we're working through the steps, and he's on step 8 right now. He's starting to make his list. And so when I said to him, "How else, is everything?" And he said, "Everything is so good." He said, "So good." He said, "I feel so much love for my family." That's standing in the sunlight, right? When you can have a shift in perception from fear to love, from self to love. Some of you guys know this. My dog bit someone in my apartment complex here in Nashville, and we were given 3 days to get out. And it was 3 days before Christmas. And I just did what I had to do. And, we cease fighting anything or anyone. So I had to leave a lot of things because I didn't have a place to stay. And my bestie in AA, who's so generous and kind and wonderful and loved, said, "You're not staying in the car." Because there was also some financial distress. She said, "You're not staying in the car for Christmas." And so she paid for a hotel for the week between Christmas and New Year. And that's standing in the sunlight, because I'll tell you this, guys, the hardest thing in my life for me to learn in this program was how to receive. Because I wasn't used to the we. I've been on my own since I was a teenager, and I was used to doing everything myself. I was, independent to the extreme, not because I wanted to be, not because I wasn't tired, because I was exhausted, but because I had to be. And see, then you guys taught me we all want to help each other. You have to receive the help, the gift. I remember someone saying to me one time, "Didn't you ask God for help?" And I said, "Of course I did." And he said, "Well, then how did you think it was going to come?" And I was like, oh, yeah, I have to be open to the form in which love and help come, because I don't always recognize it. I want to say this. Because I remember someone called me who I hadn't talked to for at least a year, called me. She must have heard through the grapevine, if you will, that I was homeless. And she called, and she was sounding in a very pitying place. And I said, look, this situation doesn't mean that God is still not in control. And this situation doesn't mean that I'm not relying on God. God is still in control, and I'm fine. Thank God I have a car. You know how many people in that situation that I noticed who didn't even have shelter? And one night we did sleep in the car, and it was cold, and it didn't matter because I just double dressed and I had blankets, and it was fine. And I didn't even know it was supposed to snow, but it snowed that night. And when I woke up, the car was covered like an igloo. And so I opened my eyes and saw it, and I was like, oh, wow, God, this is beautiful. That's standing in the sunlight when I don't feel sorry for myself. And I have a big Alaskan Malamute who was in the back seat, the whole back seat, I might add. And I said, King, wake up. It's snowing. Let's go outside and play in the snow. And that's what we did. And that's standing in the sunlight. A sunlight is a shift in perception from fear to love. And I felt so loved, even the situation. One of the days I was going to the grocery store, and there was a girl who had her car parked right up front at the entrance, maybe dropping somebody off or whatever. And her license plate tag said, "Be easy," EAZY, be easy. And I pulled up next to her, and I rolled my window down, and I said, "Thank you so much for putting that on there." I said, "I really think today it's for me." I said, there's this job stuff, and I didn't even mention, God forbid, the homeless stuff. And I said, "But I feel like I've been trying to control it and figure it out and all that." And I said, I'm going to be easy about trying to figure things out and trust God and the universe more. And I said, "Thank you so much." And she said, "Thank you for seeing it that way. Thank you for receiving it that way." And I was like, oh, so cool. Then I got on the phone with a sponsee, and we were chatting. And then I sat for a few minutes while we were chatting. And then, we were finished with the call, and I got a tap on my window. And it was the driver of the car. And in her hands, she had this huge, beautiful bouquet of purple and pink flowers. And I just was so shocked. I just started crying. Standing in the sunlight, man, a stranger just delivers a big, beautiful bouquet of flowers. So cool. Then she handed me $100, a $100 bill. And she said, "I just felt like I needed to do this." And I couldn't even speak. Literally, I could not even speak. I just cried. And she said, "It's okay." I said, "Thank you so much. I received this." Because, see, I had to start saying out loud, "Thank you, I received that. Thank you, I received that." Now what I say is, "Thank you for the help, God. Thank you for the help. Thank you for the help. Thank you for the help." Another day during that time when I was staying in a hotel, there was a rainbow from literally, I walked out the door, literally, it was from one end to the other. It was a full entire rainbow, which I had never seen before. And I looked at it and I was just like, wow. And I took a video of it to show it was all around. And then I just wanted to get a picture of it. And I thought, well, I wonder if I go up to the second floor, if I can get a better picture of it. So I went upstairs and it didn't. But on the way, I found $20. See, these are things I like to call God winks. But it is truly because of the sunlight of the Spirit that these things not only happen, but that I recognize them. I don't know if some of you guys know Ed Mutum. He was a wonderful member of Alcoholics Anonymous, a wonderful speaker, a wonderful teacher, and a very dear friend. And I don't remember where we were. I think we were somewhere because there was a lot of woods, so probably at a retreat or at some type of treatment center or something. And we were standing outside and we were talking, and he was like, I don't know how really tall he was, but very, very, very tall. He was like almost 7 feet or even 7 feet. And he put his face up to the sun and he said, put your face up to the sun. It's very healing. And if you guys think about that, isn't it so healing to put your face up to the sun? And so I do that from time to time, put my face up to the sun because I know it's very healing. There's an analogy I like very much that I heard from spiritual teachers, and everything we want is down the stream, right? Everything we want is downstream because it's easy to go downstream. So I'm going downstream and I bump into Young, who's been a beautiful gift in my life. And then I continue to go down the stream, and after being homeless, I find a great apartment and I find a great job. And on that Friday, I moved into the apartment, and on that Monday, I started a new job. That's how quick God can turn things around. Because I had to move out so quickly, I didn't even bring any of my furniture. I left it all there because it was right before Christmas. I didn't have any help. I didn't have anywhere to store it. So I left all my furniture. The apartment that I moved into was a model apartment that they showed so that they could rent. It was completely furnished, including 2 large screen TVs. And this is where God moved me, somewhere better than I could have ever imagined, somewhere perfect. Something that I didn't even know about. I just happened to pass by these apartments when I was walking my dog. So all these things are downstream, right? When I'm going downstream, I find the apartment, the job, things just light up for me. But what happens as a human is I paddle upstream. I got to look harder. I got to work more. I got to do better. I got to fill out more applications. I have to stay up all night. I have to work these 6 jobs. I have to go to all these meetings. I have to, walk the dog more. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to try harder, do better, be better, live better. Whoo, and I'm paddling upstream. And guess what happens when I paddle upstream? I'm exhausted because I'm going against the current. There's a line in the books that says we relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. See, if I'm struggling, I'm in self. I'm trying to do it myself. I'm not in God reliance. I'm in self-reliance. And so in order for me to go back downstream where everything that I want is, and all the alignment and purpose and inspiration where God is, I don't even have to turn the boat around. I just have to drop the oars. And then I feel the things of relief and ease and freedom just by dropping the oars. And the stream is code for God, capital T, capital S, just like sunlight of the Spirit is capitalized in our big book. And the boat automatically turns itself back around to go back downstream. And then guess what happens? I get to bask in the sunlight. I just get to bask in the sunlight. Standing in the sunlight at last is having peace. It's having ease, comfort, freedom, sanity. And the big, fat, beautiful W-E, that's the first word and the first step, because I could not do this by myself. I would not know the God of my understanding without you. I thank you so much for your time and attention. Young, thank you again. Everyone, thank you for your service, and thank you for listening. Thank you.